We said we'd have a surprise for you, and we do. It is your second podcast of the week, Caleb. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Playoff week here. First week of the playoffs. I'm super excited. A lot of good games on tap.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a better week of the season. Definitely a lot of anticipation. We get excited. Have 2 extra games. There will be 8 games on Sunday. If you're not familiar with the format, there's 12 teams that make the tournament. The top 4 teams get a bye, which means you get your 5, 12, 6, 11, 7, 10, and 8, 9 matchups, which is the first round or the round of 16. And then those winners play basically 4 hours later against the top 4 seeds in the quarterfinals who all got a bye, which will be 4, 3, 2, and 1. Mm-hmm. So a lot of really, really exciting matchups. And I think as you think back to last year, a lot of these games have a different feel to them. Last year, it kind of felt like it was a race for second, a battle for second. Mm-hmm. This year, you have your top seed, the Nets. They've lost twice, and your second and third seeds have each lost 3 times. And then all the way at 4th seed, the Warriors, who get a bye, they went 6-5. They were barely above 500. So it feels like there's a lot more parity, which is exciting.
A lot of balance.
Yeah, we're going to post on Thursday, which is probably when a lot of you will hear this. Thursday, we're going to post a bracket challenge on our Facebook page and also on our Instagram story. You can create an account on what's called challenge.com, and the winner is going to get a gift card. Again, we only had 2 people get the Final Four correctly last year, so we'll see how that looks this year. There's a lot more parity, so again, I think it could create for some crazy results. Let's preview all of them.
Yes.
Let's do it. So 12:15 on Sunday the 13th, we start off with the 5-12 game. It's the 5th-seeded Heat, who are 6-5, against the 12th-seeded Celtics, who are 1-10. The Heat defeated the Celtics in Week 9 by a score of 73-61. Terrell Hendricks and C.J. Link lead the way for the Heat, scoring-wise, as do Antonio Phillips and Jonathan Townsend for the Celtics. Your only players in double figures for both teams. Heat-Celtics, to kick us off, what do you think about this game, Caleb?
Yeah, this is one of those matchups in the first round that I think we'll have maybe a couple of these potentially of teams who kind of recently played each other. These 2 teams matched up, I think, a few weeks ago. And yeah, just 2 teams who are pretty similar in personnel, pretty similar in style of play, I think. Not a ton of differences in height and just guard play. I'm looking for Terrell Hendricks to have a big performance, kind of get his team advancing to the playoffs, as the Heat have had their struggles in the past in the playoffs. Unfortunately, the upset they had last year against Billy Baptist himself. So I think they're actually, this is the same Heat-Celtics matchup of last year. So rematch.
The only one, yes.
And so I think the Heat are going to have probably a little bit of extra motivation. I think hopefully they're probably going to want to take quick work of them. Hopefully, for the Heat's sake, they're going to have a big first half and put them away. But we all know the Celtics are scrappy, and they like to hang tough. So it should be a really good matchup. I think I probably favor the Heat a little bit, but I'm excited to see how some of these young Celtics players perform in their first playoffs.
Yeah, the Celtics haven't had their full team here for a little while. Antonio Phillips has missed past couple of games. Jonathan Townsend missed a couple games in there too. So they'll be excited to get everybody back. The Heat, who had the forfeit last week over the Rockets, they also haven't played just a game in a long time. Mm-hmm. So we'll see if there's any sort of lull as they step into things. Again, the off week on the 30th and then didn't play the Rockets. So if you have forgotten a little bit about them, it's, Terrell Hendricks had an amazing season. And then, of course, you have, C.J. Link and maybe Lamarius Lillard. We'll see Cam Link, Jaquez Springer, Alonzo King, Keyshawn Williams, all kind of these same guys around him. So we'll kind of see what that looks like. Suns versus Pistons in the 120 game. That is 6 versus 11. This was the most lopsided score in the regular season of the current matchups that we have. Suns took down the Pistons 114-60. The Suns are also 6-5. The Pistons are 3-8. What we hope we don't get is more of the same, and where the Pistons were undermanned. They did have Mark. They got Kapri in there at halftime, but he only made 5, and at that point, the game was well out of reach. So, the Ryan Kwasnick at 23.4 points per game and Vashawn Sims at 18.8. Just about everybody on the Suns seems to score in double figures. And then for the Pistons, again, it's Mark Connor at 27 and Capri Alston at 17.3. We just don't know the state of the Pistons roster. Talk about this game, what you're looking forward to. these are two of the teams that have been the least predictable all
Yeah.
season. But
Yeah, I think initially, talk about very tough draw for the Pistons. I think Suns, we all knew going into the year they were at full strength, one of, if not the most dangerous team in the league. They are the 6th seed because you mentioned, they just the inconsistencies of rosters showing up. But if the roster that showed up on this last Sunday, and their win against the Warriors shows up, they are going to be a very tough out. And for an 11-seeded Pistons who also had struggles, all respects to AP and their team, but this one might not be close. Just in my personal opinion, the Suns are just loaded, and it could have been any team in that 11th seed. It could have been us. It could have been the Celtics. And it might not matter who they play in that first round because they're just a well-oiled machine when they are all there. Kavas and Vashon, Jameer, potentially, and couple all-league caliber players. John Oliver, Derek Dale. I mean, they are just loaded. So I'm hoping for not a blowout, but it's just a tough draw, and I'm expecting a big one from the Suns.
yeah, it is ironic that a decent chunk of the Pistons roster, that kind of AP and Ryan are from very similar parts of Chicago Heights, I believe. And I mean, they played together last season. Kevin Howard, Anthony Anderson, a couple guys that were also on that Suns team last year. So I would expect it to be certainly competitive, but also very friendly. Like, those are guys that have played together for a long time. But Kevin Howard, for example, is just, I mean, we haven't seen him in however long, and I don't know that we ever will again, which is just speaks to part of the issues that they have had. On one hand, while the Suns did have everybody last week, and it was refreshing to see, just because that did happen doesn't mean it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
So I don't want to look too far ahead yet to what could be a Suns-Lakers game, but it feels like a full Suns team is going to be tough for the Lakers to beat them. However, if the Suns don't have their pieces, the Suns might even struggle in this game, which sounds crazy to say. We just don't know what the Pistons are going to have, and of course we don't know what Vashon and Jared and John Oliver's status is. We just haven't seen a lot of them recently, so purely speculation. But going off what you said, a full Suns team is going to be a team that people probably don't want to face, and I hope the Pistons can have their full team there, because in the playoffs, I think every team deserves to have a chance with their whole team to make a run. But we'll see if it's meant to be. We'll know here soon.
Yeah.
225, the 7-seeded Rockets against the 10-seeded Bucks. This was a really good game back in the regular season. Week 4, 80-78, the Rockets held on there at the end. Tone Marshall obviously leading the way with 30.9 points per game. Your scoring leader there in that race. Harry Marshall is exactly 10 points a game. I mean, that shows the gap between scorers. Billy Baptist at 22.6 and Ucale at 14.1. When these two teams did play, it was, if I remember, it was basically 6-on-5 for the whole game. There were a lot of people missing. So while it was a great game, maybe not fully representative of what Sunday's game would look like, that was probably the most complete Rockets team we've seen all season. Also, when they played the Bulls, I mean, those two teams were their strongest. You guys didn't have Billy there towards the end. I believe, was it CeCe that was also gone that day? Does that sound right? I think you were missing a big that day.
Yeah.
So,
and Evan.
Evan was gone as well, because you just had the 5. So you were missing a bunch of guys. So Rockets and Bucks, talk about this game. What I look forward to is two of the best scorers in the league and guys who could potentially spark a run for their team, just the way they can take over a game. They play in the round of 16. Pretty tough draw.
Yeah, the top-level talent here is going to be on full display with Tone and Billy. Fortunately, we didn't get to see that hardly at all. Billy was there for the last maybe 6 minutes, 5-6 minutes of our game against them. Kind of had to do what he could, but hopefully a full 40 minutes of Tone and Billy will be awesome. And then, I guess for these who will be the second or third leading scorers for both these teams. Harry was a very consistent player when he showed up. We obviously know what we'll get from Alex Thorson as a great distributor of the ball, great playmaker, but not necessarily a scorer. Will Hunter Jacobs show up and play well for the Rockets? So who's gonna be that second leading scorer for them? I'm assuming obviously if Harry and those guys show up, and then for us, what kind of Alex Malinch will we see in the playoffs? I think he he's had his ups and downs this year. He can even atone to that himself. But if we get the locked in, focus dialed in, Alex Malinich, he's gonna be a problem for this Rockets team with limited size, as well as CeCe Malone, two guys who I think could take advantage of them on the interior. So I'm really excited for this matchup. I think we could have beat them early in the year even without Billy. We had a great game plan. Tone had a few more shots than we did, but I think either of these teams could be one of those sleeper teams as you circle as a team that could make a semifinal run.
Yeah, you look at in this all same side of the bracket, Mark Capri as on an 11 seeded team, and you have Billy on a 10 seed is pretty amazing that some of those scorers are seeded as low as they are, but also the types of matchups they have in the first round. It is worth noting Tone Marshall's lowest scoring game was against the Bucks in the regular season. Of course, Billy Baptist's lowest scoring game was as well. Now he only played about the last 6 or 7 minutes of the game, but still, both those guys are going to look to get theirs, and then we'll see kind of what formulates around that. But I've watched enough basketball over the years and the March Madness tournament and whatnot. Sometimes you need a guy like that on your team to sort of spark a run. And of course, the winner plays the Spurs, which is not ideal with how they're with how they're playing and their tournament experience. But either way, it's going to be fun to sort of sit back and watch. Final round of 16 game at 3:30. The Bulls versus the Grizzlies. I'm a guru with these kind of stats. It's the second straight year that the 8 and the 9 seed play in a rematch of just 1 week prior, which is bizarre. The two teams trending in opposite directions. The Grizzlies have lost 3 in a row. The Bulls have won 2. The Bulls, 3 of 4.
3 or 4, yeah.
With a huge win over the Warriors there, I think, which kind of turned their season around in overtime. They lost to the Rockets there when Tone had 43, and then wins at the end of the season.
Lakers,
getting that Lakers win as well kind of saved, because if it wasn't for that, the Lakers would be down in that 10. The Bulls would be down in the 7-10 game, and things would look very different. Grizzlies have shown they can beat anybody in the league with their full team there. So when the Bulls played them here in Week 11, they win 78-69. The key, I think, in this game, but we'll hear your keys, is the Grizzlies get Chris White back.
Yes.
And take it away. Benny's at 19.7 a game. Bobby at 13.8 with Benny and Seth not far behind. Nick Crow and Seth not far behind. And then Chris and Chad, the two clear leading scorers for the Grizzlies at 21.1 and 17.5 a game. Mm-hmm. Talk about just some big boys going at it in the final round of 16 game.
Yeah, this should be a really fun matchup. Probably my most anticipated matchup of the first round is this 8-9 game, which, to no surprise, it's the two closest seeds and the two closest teams. I'm excited to see, hopefully, we get a Chris White versus the bigs of the Bulls. I think that really was a big. You can't talk about that last week's game without talking about Chris White not being there. Just not only offensively, he brings 20 points a game, but defensively, he adds that size and physicality to hang with Nick and Seth. So I think that was a big key. Obviously, all credit to the Bulls; they played well, but can they beat this Grizzlies team with a full roster? I love the depth that the Bulls are bringing right now. With it almost seems like Benny is, not taking a back seat, but he doesn't have to score 30 points a game. He doesn't have to score, in the low 30s, high 20s for them to win anymore. Kind of like he did in years past. He's only getting to that maybe 18, 19 points per game, but you're seeing a lot of production from Nick, from Seth, and from Bobby. They're stepping up. Carson Monk and Jonas Switzer are also bringing viable minutes off the bench. So they're a much more balanced team and don't necessarily need to rely on the one scorer. So that's kind of my kind of thoughts on this game. It's probably like a coin flip game in my opinion, a 50-50. Like it could go either way.
As a true 8-9 game should be.
Which I'm super excited for it. So hopefully, Grizzlies get Chris White there. Chad plays a little bit better. He kind of struggled last week. And then Coach Walt and Mendy and those guys can have a good playoff matchup. Yeah,
I don't think either of these teams will get blown out at any point. Even if they win and go on to play the overall number 1 seed Nets, I don't think either team gets blown out, and I think either team could potentially win that matchup. I think they're that talented. The Bulls, as of late, though, they've got to win over the number 3 seeded Lakers and the number 4 seeded Warriors. They had competitive losses against your 5, 6, and 7 seeds, so the Bulls definitely can play. But, by the way, the Grizzlies only lost by 7 to the Lakers, and they beat the Warriors, and they beat the Heat, who are your 4 and 5, 6 seeds, and they beat the 6-seeded Suns Oh, and the number 2 seeded Spurs. So
yeah, I was going to say,
it's like
these
two teams can absolutely beat anybody, but they're going to have to go through each other first. Probably get Benny and Walt, Rich and Bobby, Chris and Chad with Nick and Seth. I mean, I always feel like these teams match up almost perfectly with each other. So we'll see kind of what foul trouble looks like. I think the Bulls do have more depth, but the Grizzlies have shown their ability to sort of beat that top-of-the-line talent. So I'm really excited for this game as well. And if you get through this, you have the number 1 overall seed waiting. So it's going to be a tough day for either of those teams. As we get into now the quarterfinal games, what we have is your 4-seeded Warriors, who await the winner of the number 5 Heat and the number 12 Celtics. I told Otis this on Sunday. They didn't feel great about that game. Kind of ran into a buzzsaw with that Suns team. Latrell fouled out. What's been a bummer for Latrell is not basically playing in the second half of games against the Nets and the Suns, 2 of their biggest games all season. And the one he did play all the way through, or I should say 2, against the Lakers and the Spurs, they won. So they've been a very different team, of course, with him on the court. We all know how good Latrell is. The Warriors, as bad as they lost on Sunday, were probably the winners of Sunday because of hanging on to that 4 seed with the Grizzlies losing. And the bracket, the draw that they got, they beat the Heat back in week 2, so that was a long time ago now, back in August, 65-52. Started out rough, and then we're sort of in control of things down the stretch. Barely beat the Celtics, if that were to be the matchup in week 10 on that Tyree Mosley buzzer beater. Tyree Mosley, Latrell Tidwell, at 22-4 and 14-5 a game to lead them in scoring. First question I have is, probably doesn't matter as much as the Heat as it might with the Suns or the Pistons in the second game, but what's the importance of, let me ask it this way, how much does playing 2 games with that 4-hour gap affect a team? Because we haven't really had a whole lot of doubleheaders this season. Surely it affects a team like the Heat or the Celtics a lot less than the Suns or the Pistons.
Yes.
What sort of factors do you have there?
Yeah, I think, Coach Trey Anthony's going to have to maybe manage the subs a little different that first game. Obviously, the pretty large gap there. I mean, you're not going to be too exhausted initially, but if the game is in hand, maybe working in some of your bench guys and quote unquote resting for the next game because you have that next game coming. So see maybe some of those teams doing that, especially the Suns. Possibly we'll get to them next, but yeah, I mean, I think the Heat and Celtics are both just young teams full of young guys who can get after it and play 40 minutes and then sit and then play 40 more minutes. So I don't think it would be a huge factor in this game. Yeah. Especially with those 2 teams. But I'm really interested to see kind of how the Warriors look in the playoffs. They've been such a unique team to me. They seriously have the top level talent to where they can make a finals run. They can beat the Nets in that 4-1 game if it gets to it. They can make a championship run. But they could also lose in the first round because some of their guys just have been inconsistent. You mentioned Latrell and foul trouble. So this is just one of those teams I have had a very hard time figuring out. But the top level talent is there, and I'm sure Tyree Mosley won't let his team lose in this first round. So interested to see some of these superstar matchups if we can get Terrell versus Tyree. So
yeah, the Warriors have way more experience. They don't have the depth that the Heat have, which I think they're thankful to have a bye because they have a little bit bigger team in terms of less guards, more forwards and centers, and they don't have as deep of a team. We've seen them play plenty of games this year with only 5 or 6 guys. They only have 8 guys in their team to begin with. The Heat, I think, had 10 or 11. So, and the Heat have the younger legs. I think they're going to run all day and they'll be fine. But they actually did play a doubleheader earlier this season, and we saw them slow down a bit in that second game against the Grizzlies. Now you have the playoffs, the emotions, a little bit longer break. But I think this could be just a clash of styles if it is the Warriors and the Heat, because one team wants to play slow and run it through their top guys, Tyree and Latrell, and the other team, the Heat, want to run up and down the court. The Warriors do take pretty good care of the ball, though, despite the lack of guard play, which I think would give them the edge. But we don't want to, we don't want to discredit the Celtics either, just because they're the lower seed. They almost beat the Warriors, so it certainly could see anything in these matchups. But you would expect a Warriors Heat game just based off the seedings.
Yep.
And I told Otis as well, it's nice to play the first quarterfinal game because you can play, hopefully win, and then you just can kind of enjoy the rest of what's an unbelievable slate here.
Yeah.
The rest of the day. So, one of those bright colored teams, whether it's yellow, pink, or green, is going to be your first team into the quarterfinals. 540, which is almost when a normal K1 day would be over. We're still just getting started. Possibly, we'll see, could be the biggest matchup of the day. The number 3 seed Lakers against either the 6-seeded Suns or the 11-seeded Pistons. It feels like it's trending in the direction of the Suns, just as we've seen their roster sort of evolve. The Lakers beat the Suns in Week 4, 75-60, and then back in Week 2, they blew out the Pistons when the Pistons only had 4 guys. The Suns did not have their full team when they played. Remember that game? I think they just had 5.
Yep.
That was actually sort of the start of the Suns' roster trouble, I believe, back in Week 4. For the Lakers, them and the Suns have had 2 of the best offenses in the entire league this season. LJ averaging 18.2, Kawhi 15.8. We haven't seen LJ in a while. We don't know how he's doing health-wise. We said this, though. You got to assume everybody's going to be there and ready to go in the playoffs. This could be a huge blockbuster matchup. Some people would argue, just with what we saw Sunday, the Suns probably deserve to be there on that Final Four day off of talent. But the Warriors were more consistent overall this season in terms of guys coming, and they earned that seed with some tiebreakers. So, Lakers and Suns. The Suns have never beaten the Lakers, and we don't know, again, who's going to be there, but preview what I think is going to be probably the most anticipated matchup of the day.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this matchup. If it ends up being, Lakers, Suns, other than Bulls, Grizzlies, this is probably my most anticipated matchup of the day. Potentially seeing some of these superstars clash in the playoffs. That first matchup between the Suns and Lakers, kind of put an asterisk next to it because the Lakers kind of got off to a really good start. I think they're playing 5-on-5, or with only 5 guys, no subs. They didn't have a lot of their key guys. I don't think Rashawn was there. So, again, personnel, who's going to be there is going to be a big factor. But my big emphasis for the Lakers is 2 things. It's going to be LJ Harris. What LJ will we see? Will we see LJ against Billy Baptist and the Bucks, and he kind of went toe to toe with the best player in the league, and matched every shot that he had and scored 27, 28 points, or will we get a maybe more passive, a more struggling LJ, where we have seen in some weeks as well. So I think he's going to bring his best for the playoffs. So I'm excited to see that, and then also just the 3-point shooting from the Lakers. If the Lakers can shoot the 3-ball like they have all year, Dre Jr.'s been lethal. Tone, Kawhi, even LJ at times. They're almost impossible to beat when they're all clicking on all cylinders with their shooting. So that's probably my biggest keys for them. And then obviously Suns probably should just beat it inside and use your strengths to Kavas and Derek J on some of their guys.
If you were to sort of put odds out there or could bet on certain games, my guess is the Lakers would be a slight favorite over the Suns, just because they've had a much more consistent roster. The Suns' biggest issues have come as they get tired. They don't always play with a lot of guys, and this being their second game of the day could be a huge factor. And we'll see how tough that first game is and how much guys are able to sit. If they have some of these young college guys, though, this could be an electric matchup. It's just a contrast of styles, a contrast. The Lakers, they'll shoot 43s in a game, and it's nothing. And the Suns will get 15 offensive rebounds in a game like it's nothing. So just going to be a complete clash of styles. If we knew who was going to be there, we could talk more about individual matchups, but it would be fun to see Vashawn and LJ and some of these guys go at it. I think Dre Jr. is probably an X factor in this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reminds me a lot of Zirkle, who the Suns don't have anymore. Could be tough for the Suns to guard somebody like him. But someone, I think, bold prediction, someone's going to step up in this game that we're not expecting to and knock down some shots, and I think is going to be the X factor. But this is probably as close to a pick'em as a game as you could have in the quarterfinals. But probably
our biggest upset watch as well. I think
as well.
In terms of the Lakers are a great team, but I think this is definitely an upset watch.
Yeah, it is. All that to say, if the Suns don't have the team they did last week, though, the Lakers are going to be favorites. But if they do, I think most people in their bracket challenge will pick the Lakers just because there's huge support locally for the Lakers, as there should be. And if you didn't see the Suns play last week, you probably aren't even circling this game on your radar.
Yes.
Just because of how dominant the Lakers were that first half of the season. But we know what both these teams are fully capable
Go back
of.
and watch the film and subscribe to K1 YouTube.
Thank you.
If you want to watch that Suns
Yes,
game.
Aaron will be proud of you, Caleb, for that
Little
shout out.
plug.
So thank you. But this is the start really of what I think could be absolute mayhem in the bracket. I think either of these teams is good enough to win the entire thing.
Yep.
I think you'd say that too.
Absolutely.
6:45, your 3-time defending champion Spurs. The question, of course, is going to be: is this the year that someone else lifts the title other than the Spurs? Certainly, I would think would be their toughest path to do it. They start off with either Tone Marshall's Rockets or Billy Baptist's Bucks. They beat the Rockets back in week 2. 94-70, pretty close game the first half. They ran away with it in the second. And then one of the more surprising games of the regular season, they beat you guys, the Bucks, in week 10, but it was 82-80. Because actually had the ball and the lead there in the final minute. Sorry to remind you of that. Dennis Koger in that running for Player of the Year at 20.7 points per game. He's also up there in rebounds. And then Chris Green comes in second at 14.7, but they got a lot of guys there kind of in the mix in the low double figures. So let's kind of focus this just talking on the Spurs.
Yeah.
Spurs have won 3 championships. A lot of these guys, Matt, Marty, Dustin, Dennis, and Chris, Trey, right?
Yeah.
Those 6 guys have all won 3 titles. Hopefully I'm not leaving anybody out. I think those are the 6 guys that have won on every team. Obviously Ray won 3, and then he stepped away. So those 6 guys all have won 3 titles. So talk about the Spurs, what they're going to look to do, and what it would take to beat them. Because no one has done it in the postseason.
Yeah, they are a very strong playoff team. I think the guy that stands out to me, besides Dennis Koger, we all know about Dennis. He's a superstar in the league. He'll get his. It's probably Chris Green. I think he's the biggest one that comes to mind. When he's on his A game, and when him and Dennis are running and gunning and they're getting after in transition, they are very hard to beat. They're just a well-oiled machine. Their chemistry, that they defend better than most teams in the league. And I think he's going to be that X factor for them in this playoff run. Because you look at years past, and it was always last year. I mean, you can't even really count last year just because they had so many guys with Tyree and Latrell and all those guys. But the previous years, they always had Ray, they always had Dennis. And then even Kavos a couple years ago. So they've always had that big 3.
Dane.
Yeah, I mean, they've always had...
Halcom, just some
and so
crazy talent.
Chris has always been that, we have Chris as our 4th or 5th option. He's a great added bonus in those past championship runs. So I think for Chris this year, he has to come on and be that second guy because there's not really a consistent, standout second superstar for Dennis to play with this year, like he's had in years past. So... during this playoff run, I'm excited to see what Chris brings to the table. We obviously know he has superstar level. He's a star in the league, but he hasn't really needed to do it in the big moments just because of the depth they've had. So Chris Green's a big key one for me. The savvy veteranness of Trey Johnson in the interior will cause some problems for teams. So those are a couple guys I'm looking forward to watching. Dustin Renowaz is playing at a high level, so they're definitely a tough matchup, and I feel bad for both those teams that may have to play them in their quarterfinal matchup because they're just a tough team to face.
Much to the dismay of Suns fans who were up at halftime last year in that championship game. It was Chris Green's huge game in the championship against them, and he was coming off the bench from them last season, which is
I'm not saying Chris can't
amazing.
do it or he hasn't done it, but
that's me saying
he
obviously
will have to now.
We've seen him do it. We know he can do it, and he'll look forward to doing it. But the Spurs are a different team when he's off. Don't think they'll have Ben Green on Sunday. Not sure. Busy man with that college life.
Yes.
But he adds a nice dimension for them. But these guys know their role and they play it well. Whether it's Dustin, who just a massive game Sunday, was it 4 or 5 threes he hit off the bench?
15 points, 16 points, one of those two.
Yeah,
4-point play.
When a guy like that comes in and you forget about him because you see all these other names and then it's like, oh, there you go, he's open again. These guys fill their role. So if they play to their strengths, probably the Spurs are still the favorite just with their championship experience.
Yeah.
But they also have a very difficult draw too. It's like you talk about the Lakers and the Suns also being able to win it. One of them is going to lose on Sunday.
Yeah.
And then the Spurs potentially play one of them, and then one of them loses in the semis. I mean, this side of the draw is just loaded. Probably the odds makers just ever so slightly would give it to the Spurs because they've been there, they've done that, and we saw them take down here at the end of the season everybody in their path. But they have played in, if I'm not mistaken, 5 straight games that came down to the wire. their largest margin of victory in those last 5 games is the 4-point win over the Suns, and obviously neither team was at full strength. Lost to the Grizzlies in a close game, barely beat the Bucks, barely beat the Nets, barely beat the Lakers. So they've shown that they can beat all those teams, and they're on a 4-game winning streak. They're the hottest team. But they haven't been blowing out teams like they have in the past. So I don't think people are necessarily saying, okay, the Spurs are going to win, and there's no question about it.
There are pros and cons with that, though. On the flip side of they are battle tested.
That's right, being able to win close games. Sure.
In the playoffs, we probably won't see many blowouts, so that most of these games are going to be within under 5 points, I think, down the stretch. So having the battle tested, been there, done that mentality of close games in the second half. So, but I think there are pros and cons to that situation as well.
It's funny how the narrative would be slightly different had the Nets pulled off that game. We moved to their game, the quarterfinal game of the day. Mm-hmm. The Nets deserved to be the 1 seed. They were the most consistent team all season. They were 9-0 in regulation, a couple of real tough losses in overtime to the Spurs and to Tone Marshall, who had a great game when Laster wasn't there. The Nets deserved to be the number 1 seed. They deserved to be playing in that last game of the day, and they deserve to be right there alongside the Spurs in the title conversation. And Martavius Laster has been the leader of that. 21.9 points per game. Sammy Hines at 15.5. But it really could be any of these teams, and that's what makes it so exciting. So the Nets beat the Bulls in Week 8, 65-52, and they beat the Grizzlies in Week 10, 63-53. So all 3 of these teams actually have played now each other within the last month. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Bulls and the Grizzlies will have played twice in 2 weeks. Let's talk about the Nets. Coach Chills has got to be your kind of slam dunk for Coach of the Year this year. They take the same team they had last year, same exact team, and they go from 4th to 1st in what has obviously been a more competitive, deeper league, and they've done it without a big man. Will this game potentially be a problem for them? Because they're going to play a team that's got not only 1 big man, but several big men. And how's that going to be a factor in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think the size, it really hasn't been an issue. I think we've mentioned it all year with them, and I think we're kind of waiting almost, not for them to lose or whatever, but we're waiting for that size to become a factor and them to really struggle, and we're all like, oh, we told you that the size was going to come, but it really hasn't.
It really hasn't, yeah.
So I think you just credit the guys on the roster. I think another a big guy for that obviously is Mook Lawrence. He plays bigger than his size. Obviously Maurice Thoreau's a big they're a big man. But Mook Lawrence plays bigger. He rebounds bigger. He guards bigger than he is. So I think obviously a lot of credit goes to him defensively and rebounding. But you just have guys who flat out just get after it. You have Sammy Hines and Puda are just some of the most athletic players in the league. So rebounding, getting up and the guards grill. So even though they may have a weakness in the post, it's hard to get the ball into the post because they have good ball pressure from the point guards for the whole game. You have Puda and Sammy double teaming at smart instances. Ronnie Jackson and Jared Harris plays bigger. So they have these guys who, sure, they're small, but they're smart defenders and they play bigger than their size. Actually, would lead on. So I don't know if it's going to make too much of a difference. I remember both these games pretty well, and the size wasn't really a factor for these guys. The games were close in a sense, but ultimately the star power of Puda kind of won the day for them in their matchup. So I'm looking for him to have a really big playoff run, kind of cement his potential MVP season. And I'm also looking for Sammy Hines to have a big postseason run as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. They really do defend the post well. They are obviously the best defensive team in the league. It seemed like the Bulls found something there against the Lakers. Just kind of remembered, oh, hey, we're really big and we're really good. We should probably throw the ball inside a little bit more.
We had 2 guys who are 6'8". So.
Exactly. Now, so do the Grizzlies. So we'll see if, what is left of the team that wins that 8 versus 9 game, because it's going to take everything you have. There will be no resting anybody to get through that.
It is a pretty late start, too. What is it, 7:50? So, I don't know. The time it's a long day for the Bulls or Grizzlies.
Yeah. Long time to wait if you're the Nets. So.
Yes, yeah. So potentially time could be a factor as well.
Yeah, so that could be another really good. It's a different feel than last year's 1-8 game. The Knicks played pretty well in that game, but it was kind of like, all right, the day's pretty much over here. The Spurs are going to be moving on to the semis. It doesn't have that feel this year, but the Nets are probably right there along with the Spurs in terms of betting favorites. A lot of people like what the Lakers did, even though they didn't play great at the end of the season. And then what we've seen Tyree and Latrell, who won a championship last year, what they're capable of with the Warriors. Mm-hmm. And then even though the Heat are 5 and the Suns are 6, the Suns have showed what their sort of capabilities are. But even the Heat there at 5 with Terrell Hendricks, the Rockets at 7 with Tone Marshall, you guys at 10 with Billy, Pistons at 11 with Mark, and then the size of the Bulls and the Grizzlies, and then the Celtics really have shown that they can play with anybody. It really feels like all these teams are capable of doing something. So should be a lot of fun if, and I mean if, the seeds were to hold. You would get Nets and Warriors in the semifinals, and then Spurs and Lakers. We won't spoil what our bracket predictions will be.
No,
that's
I haven't filled out a bracket quite
if
yet.
the seeds were to hold, which March Madness, or in this case November, I don't know, nuttiness maybe, would tell you the seeds will not hold.
No.
But,
we need a name for this Sunday. Sorry for interrupting you, but there's 8 days.
Yeah.
Something with.
I don't think November nuttiness takes the case.
But like
the cake,
like
but
like the Manic Monday for tennis. You're a big tennis guy. Just
Yes.
something to do with Sunday, and there's 8 games. Something to do. We got to name this over the years because there's 8 games. It's going to be jam packed. I'm struggling to think of a word on the spot, but something an S word that's crazy or insane because it's just going to be nuts. I think.
all right, there you have it. Somebody send us what we should start referring this Sunday as. I think in the last time we talked about it, I referred to it as some sort of like big time mega mayhem Sunday, which doesn't probably fit the bill. But 8 games.
We need something that rolls well because
Yeah.
I mean, from here on out, this league, I mean, this first day is going to be just an absolute jam
Pretty
packed game
iconic,
of basketball.
Somebody send that suggestion our way, and maybe we'll use it. You'll become famous as we
Yes.
coin the term. But 8 games, you're right. Heat, Celtics, Suns, Pistons, Rockets, Bucks, Bulls, and Grizzlies, and then your 4 teams waiting there will go Warriors, Lakers, Spurs, and that's in that order. So pretty fun. Come grab a walking taco, a burger, a hot dog from our concession stand. Girls will be working hard all day, and hang around till what could be close to 9 o'clock as we run into the evening. We get 2 of these a year, 1 in each season, so kind of come and soak that in. It should be pretty special. And we'll see which 4 teams are left standing at the end of things. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Some bumps and bruises will be had from those 4 teams. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but they're definitely going to earn the championship this year.
Yes, hopefully not too much blood, but
No.
may the odds be ever in your favor, as they would say if you're a fan of the Hunger Games. But appreciate you guys joining us, a special playoff preview podcast as we look forward to Sunday, November 13th, and then we'll be back on the 20th for the 2 semifinal matchups as well as the championship. So don't miss it Sunday, and don't come late either. It's going to start off with a bang. Heat Celtics in the 12-15 game. So appreciate you, Caleb, for your work all season on these. Couldn't be more excited. And then again, catch the bracket challenge, which is going to be out on social media here, probably as you guys are listening to this. That's going to be posted, and see if somebody can not only nail the Final 4 perfectly, but could we potentially get a first ever perfect bracket? The odds would tell you absolutely not, but hey, hopefully a couple hundred people do this thing and somebody makes a run at it. So it'd be fun to get through the first day perfect, which even that seems almost impossible, but we'd love to see someone do it. So appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be with you here Sunday the 13th. 8 games. Somebody send us a name too, so we can sort of coin this iconic day in K1 history, but we'll be there with you. So thanks, Caleb, and we'll be with you guys soon.
See you guys Sunday.